So it is springtime here in Denver. You can tell by all the snow. And today's video, or I think last one with the Supra Mark 5, was an install for the Bag Rider Super Low. But with my buddy Steven's Mark 5 Supra, today we're going to be going over how to do the air suspension install with the Airlift Performance suspension. And then we'll also take a look at the difference between the two with the suspension installed of max ride height and then max air out. So we kind of take a look at the difference between the two if you're deciding on going with Airlift Performance or the Bag Rider Super Low suspension. So unlike the first video, I'm going to go a little more into depth with the install. That way, if you are doing it yourself, running into issues, you know, I could try and help address the tools needed, how we run the airline, and then of course with the Mark 5 Supra having such a small trunk space, how we're going to go ahead and do the 4-gallon trunk install with the dual compressor setup as well. So wiring, airlines, removing old suspension, and of course putting in the new stuff. So before we tear into that, I did go ahead, Teflon taped all the fittings and airlines and everything that was provided with the kit with about 3 wraps. I know they come with that, I guess, like kind of already Teflon taped or whatever. I do it anyways just to help prevent leaks. But I went ahead and pre-air tested the bags and the tank as well to 100 PSI. Check for leaks before doing this. We're still going to do an 8-hour leak test just to make sure there's no leaks. That, to me, that's always the biggest thing, and I'm sure with anyone else, their suspension, that's priority in a sense. So with that, taking a look at the rear, we have the Airlift Performance rear strut out of the box and rear bag, and this is what's going to be replaced is the rear strut spring and then the top and bottom perch. So first things first, with the Supras, you will have the electronic portion of this, and it's already tucked it back behind here, is this little clip in the rear and a clip in the front. So this guy right here, you know, pinch this in, slide it straight up, and then what we're going to do for now is we're going to tuck this nicely when we get all this removed, and same over here with the fronts as well. So this guy, same thing, pinch in and remove. So by doing this, unless you purchase like a cancellation kit from RSR or maybe another company, as soon as you start your car, you're gonna have a kind of like a code error. It's not gonna throw anything out of whack. It pops on once each time you start the vehicle. It doesn't continuously flash or anything like that, but it does let you know that that sensor of the sensors is disconnected. If it's a big deal to you, you're more than welcome to order that cancellation kit before doing the install. That way it's less of a tedious work of removing the wheels, car up on jack stands, the whole 9 yards. I myself didn't do it. As of right now, Steven didn't purchase the kit either, but no problem with that. So something to keep in mind going forward. So I'm gonna cut this, I'm gonna kind of tear a little bit more into the back, show the tools that I'll be using to remove this lower bucket. And as we start tearing through some of this rear suspension, I'll go a little more in depth. That way you can kind of get a better eye of how to remove all this and throw all the new stuff in as well. First thing that I did is the bolt back here. That's going to adjust your suspension camber in the rear. So what I did is I made these 2 marks to indicate where it is right now before removing it and throwing it back on. That way we don't throw this out of whack. I want to keep it how it is, and then if we need to make adjustments, we can later, but as of right now, I don't want that to change once I remove it and reinstall it. So as mentioned, ratchet, and then for that bolt back there, you're going to be looking at a 21 to remove that, as well as a adjustable wrench. And then for this guy right here, for the strut, we're going to be looking at a size 18. So those two, to undo those 2 bolts, drop this bucket, shimmy this out, and then this as well after you have this correct bolt. So we're gonna actually go ahead and grab that right now. The other thing is too is just in case impact, good old classic breaker bar with lots of mileage on it as well. And then once these are both removed, we'll take a look at the difference between the Airlift Performance bag assembly setup and then the struts as well. So after you take a sip of some unnecessary energy drink, which is needed, and then let's see what size we need for this guy. We're gonna take a guess at 1/2 inch. So half, it's gonna have that design to it, way too big. So let's take another run over here. And I can only assume it might be this guy, might be the 3/8. I think the 7/16 is over here. Try to keep stuff as organized as I can for the sake of not losing stuff, but obviously we see where that just put me right at the beginning. So we'll just take this whole little setup right here with the extension. So it's gonna be one of these two, probably the 7/16. Can't remember off the top of my head. Too big. And then this guy, 3/8. That is money right there. So for the top of this, to get these 3 bolts off, you're gonna want the 3/8, just like this. Your standard isn't gonna work on these guys. So 3/8 for the top bolts, 18 for the bolt that holds the bottom of the strut, and then the 21 for that guy back there, combined with the ratchet and crescent wrench. So I'm gonna go ahead and toss this stuff back over here before I lose it and get that stuff removed. Got the rear suspension completely removed, as mentioned. The bolt that we marked from the backside drops this whole bucket downwards, and then the other one right here for the bottom of the strut right here allowed that whole portion to be removed pretty damn easy. So something to recommend. If you can, keep your jack nearby. Once you remove that bolt, this arm will just drop right away. So support that, slides the bolts out easier, and there is a small plastic cover at the bottom of it right here. The back side of it stops that bolt from sliding out pretty easy. So just remove this, pops out, pops in, and that will allow this to slide on out. That bucket drops, and then you end up with your old suspension next to the new. So taking a look at this, as mentioned, factory does have that connection for the sensor. Your new super low or airlift suspension does not have that for it to connect. So cancellation kit if needed, otherwise tuck that wire. We'll take a look at that too in a second. But otherwise, with the Airlift Performance, it does have the same brackets to hook up the wires that were from factory as well. So out of the box, this is about what we look at in difference between the two. And then for the bag and spring, we can see quite a bit of change on the height of this. So this bag isn't, obviously filled up with air, so it's not fully expanded. You do see a little bit more out of this than what it sits right now. And then of course, when it's aired out, we're gonna see a complete change in the length between these two. So that's what you should be looking at for the rear suspension. I'm gonna go ahead and toss all this back in, and then we'll go ahead and nicely tuck this. What I did on the other Supra with the super low is kind of coiled it up nice and then zip tied it a little further back. Again, the main thing you want to make sure is that when you put your wheel on aired up driving or aired out, that you don't want to catch this by any chance. Loose wires, you want everything tucked away nice. Even these guys, as mentioned, are going to have the little hook on the suspension for those to sit back in. So we're gonna go ahead and get this all put back together and take a look at how it all fits. Once done with that, we're gonna go ahead and jump into the front suspension, and then we're gonna start running the air lines probably through underneath this panel right here, and then over that wheel well, same as this front, tucked over behind, and then chase it into the trunk setup. So I'll get this together and we'll take a look at that. So got the strut in. It's actually pretty quick and easy. Airlift bag riders don't provide bolts for this. You're just going to use your factory bolts that you removed when removing the stock suspension. But in pretty easy. And then even for this part right here, again, it utilizes the this bracket to go ahead and hold these two. Again, this is for the sensor, so what we'll probably do just to make it easier in case Steven does decide to get the cancellation kit, we're gonna hook these both back into the brackets. Either gonna kind of, loop this back right here and zip tie real nice, or right here with this guy and zip tie that way it stays out of the way nice and clean. Before throwing this airbag into the bracket, I just want to take a quick look at this. Something to always do is reference the front and rear installation guide. Before doing that, the last thing you want to do is forget any of the bolts, washers, crush washers, fitting of course, but do reference this to go ahead and build this assembly properly. Where we're at right now is this like little bushing or grommet right here, washer and bolt. This guy right here, once this is installed in this bucket with this opening with the fitting facing backwards this way for the airline to run back behind this into the trunk, this guy is going to mount from the bottom right here up through just like that, and it's going to tighten to hold this into place. So top of this up in this pocket, easy as that. So throw this in there, we'll take a look at it, get that bolt lined back in on that side, and then this should be taken care of for the rear all in all, and then we'll jump into the front. So again, a few things to note. Even for this guy right here, is going to utilize the same 18 socket to tighten this into the bottom of the bracket. All the same tools we use to remove, same tools we're going to use to reassemble. So something to note as well, breaker bar did come in handy. Do recommend, if so too, to make it a little easier. Impact, be able to get the nut off the bolt a little quicker, and then probably a mallet just to kind of give a light tap on that back bolt just to get it started to push it out easier as well. So get this tidied up, we'll take a last look at it, and then we're going to jump to the front. And then obviously everything that we have done on this passenger side is going to be the exact same as the driver's side. Rear is done. You're going to do pretty much the same thing on the driver's side. I do believe there might be a sensor bracket that we'll take a look at. All right, so this is the rear driver's side. And as mentioned, there is this sensor bracket that is bolted to this bottom bucket. The best thing to do, that way we don't just drop the bucket and damage anything, is I did already go ahead and loosen tight space down here. It's gonna be a 10, but this bolt right here up top, you want to just go ahead and loosen that guy, and then once that is loosened, this is gonna be free. That way when you drop this, it's not going to catch this and damage anything. So again, just as we worked on the passenger side over there, it's all going to be the same setup for this driver's side. So for the front, these are going to be the sizes needed. This one's going to be the 18, 16. These two essentially are going to be for back here. This bolt, and then the matching one on this other side. These are going to be the main ones that lock in the bottom of this strut right here essentially. And then as well as an 8, probably a shorter socket or maybe even a wrench for this guy right here. That needs to be removed. So either once you break this loose, you could probably turn this, get that easier, or with the space on this backside, loosen that, remove this sensor from the strut, all of this right here, just pretty much, pulls away from the factory brackets on this guy. And then the last one needed is going to be a 13. So the last thing needed to remove this are going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Holding the top of this strut in, as you can see right here, these guys. So 4 bolts from the top, main one from the back holding the bottom of the strut. This little guy right here, I believe a sway bar link as well. Once that's all removed, this should be able to drop down, push down a little bit, and we're gonna go ahead and wedge this on out of the front, and then kind of vice versa, everything we do removing this, same bolts to get this guy in. By the way, if you are doing the Airlift Performance bag riders, anything like that, do note that on the front, it does specify front right, which would be this side of the car, and FL for front left. The rears are interchangeable, so there's no specific side. So do note that as well, so we don't put them in backwards or any of those kind of issues. So factory strut's still on the passenger side. If you have an extra set of hands or someone to help you, it's gonna be a lot easier. If you are doing this on your own, there is a technique to be able to get it out. The difficult part is being able to compress this down and obviously get out past, thankfully not body fender, but like this plastic covering instead. So you can loosen this, get a little more lift out of it to make it easier to move this out from the area. Did go ahead and get the driver's side done. Another thing too, with the Airlift Performance struts, this size does change to a 12. So all 4 of those, it's gonna be different size than the factory ones. So this is it installed. Everything's all bolted back in. Sensor, the bolt and nut on the backside that locks the bottom of the strut in, and then the bolt to the sway bar link as well. So the way I was able to get that other side out, if you have the accessibility and you're doing this by yourself, I highly recommend a spring compressor attached on both sides, not the bag obviously, but the spring. You'll compress that spring down, and then it will allow you to go ahead and push downwards on the factory strut, with everything already dropped from the top 4 bolts, and maneuver outwards. Have a wedge. It's the most difficult part, kind of like the E46 chassis and some BMWs. This backside acts like a clamp and holds the strut in. So once you have this side compressed down and leaned outwards while pressing down any bit of weight on this, you'll be able to slide this little locking stud out from the back of the coupling and be able to shimmy this out safely without damaging the fender or the bumper to the vehicle. Like I said, a little bit of wiggle room up here, which is nice. Spring compressors for the spring. Even if you have an extra set of hands, it makes it way easier than just pushing downwards on this and then trying to, with your body weight, pull this down and wiggle that out. So something to also be aware of, make it a little easier for you guys. The back was pretty straightforward. Few bolts. This side, like I said, second set of hands is great, but if you're doing it by yourself, that's why I did to be able to get the driver's side out, and now I'm gonna go ahead and tackle the passenger side. Front, rear suspension, passenger side and driver's side is fully installed. As mentioned, I'm gonna go ahead and run the air lines from the front through this lower portion of the fender liner, down below, all the way back, and it's gonna chase around the backside. Make it a little easier for you guys. The size you're gonna need for this is a 10, and then also an 8 as well. So there's gonna be the 2 sizes used to remove these 2 style nuts that hold all this down. So basically, with a little bit of play right here, all the rocks and stuff, we'll be able to tuck the braided line safely through all the wires. That way nothing gets tugged. But down in here, that way if any reason we need to change stuff up, we just access just this front side to go ahead and disconnect or reconnect the airline. The nice thing with this too is underneath the car, you actually do not need to mess with anything for side skirts. So aftermarket stuff like that, you have every so often. It looks like I missed one, but exactly these guys right here running all the way down across is what you're going to want to go ahead and unbolt. So what I usually do is just kind of tuck them in here nicely. Keeps it away just from getting rubbed, anything like that. Easy access. And then going along to the back side of the car with all these bolts removed, 1, 2, 3. We're able to kind of chase up, above, and back down. So with the rear bags, that port over here where they're going to pop into, easy access to run down. Little tie wire, not tie wire, sorry, zip tie. That's why they provide it with the kit too. We'll zip tie the rear airline and the front that's going to chase over this wheel well together. That way everything's nice and secure. And then underneath this, got to rifle through this plastic panel. So I'm also going to remove these small clips too, or bolts, to go ahead and drop this down. And there's going to be a little circular kind of like pop out. It's where the battery's located in the back. So on this back right side and on the left side too is where we're going to have access to run the front and rear airlines in through to get access to the trunk. That way it's going to be a much easier connection. We don't have to drill anything or, you know, keep it very OEM as much as possible. The other thing I did not mention, Steven already helped out with too, shaved a bit of time off the install, is you do have that plastic cover that sits over this. Same thing, there should be 2 deep socket, I don't remember the size, but they'll run through, unbolt, and drops that whole tray down to have access to this. He did do an aftermarket exhaust, not part of this air suspension video, but it did help out with that. Something I wanted to mention as well. Do remember to, if you're doing this by yourself, keep an eye on the extra roll. Make sure you don't have any kinks or bends in it. It's the last thing you want to do, otherwise you do have to replace that section. You don't want to damage any of that. If you have someone helping you, awesome. So keep track of that, and let's go ahead and get this airline ran. So real quick, the airline going from the front, I did leave a little bit of slack back here. All this stuff does move while driving, obviously, so you don't want tight tension on that. Let it have a little bit of room to go ahead and move just in case. But again, it is ran right here, back behind. Connections made. Travels all the way across. I did go ahead and tuck it back under here, through, and around this guy right here. So when it comes time, when you run your airlines from the front to the back, do make sure with the, not necessarily these guys right here, the ones that cover these, the ones that actually screw in, please be aware and make sure, super giant, make sure that you do not pierce or mess up the airlines. That is going to give you a big issue with a leak, and you know that's going to be something you got to chase down. So be aware of where and how you run your airlines. Like have this one tucked above. It is going to sit a little higher up, but keep everything secure from stuff like that. So as it goes down underneath that tray and the battery panel over here, we're going to utilize this and this guy to run our airlines in through. So the nice thing is on both Supras we're running 1/4 inch airline, so with this little bit of space it's going to be perfect. Now if you're running 3/8, much bigger airline, you might run in a little bit of a mission on this. So do keep track of that, of the airline size that you ran or that you're running. But we're gonna run the front, then the back through here, and then do the same thing on the driver's side. Just get the entire front rear suspension done, airlined, tucked around the inner fender, and then under the undercover tray, chasing back along the back, airlines as well, through the little ports that I mentioned on this left, and then on this back right side. So that's all done, and have the front left, front right labeled as well, as we ran the lines through on just some tape, so it's easy to identify in case for any reason this needs to be removed. You don't have to try and figure out which of the two from either of the sides is your front and rear airline. So good tip to go ahead and do that just in case you do have to remove your manifold. So different ways to do this. If you want, you could always have the manifold mounted on top of the little cover in the back trunk, this right here. What we did with mine and what we're doing with Steven's is obviously tucking everything underneath. That way it gives you that little more trunk space in your Supra. So he's going to do just like this, kind of like a symmetrical setup. This is actually rotated, but 2 compressors in the back and then the 4-gallon tank on the front side. So generally we should see everything kind of line up right about like right here. We are going to section the original cover. That way he could remove it in case he needs access to this without having to remove the tank and the compressors. So what I did, you have a little more room if you're running a single compressor, but if you're running a dual compressor setup, you do have that extra harness as well that you need to go ahead and have for that second compressor power ground, where it has this small tap to the main. It's like a red male and female connector. So I coiled everything up real nice. The second compressor harness is right here, snug underneath both grounds, both power connections. The ignition source for this car is real easy to get to. That pink wire is tucked back behind here with the fuse for this guy as well. It is this 1, 2, 3, number 5 fuse with this small connector. That's where you're going to tap for the ignition source. And then obviously the main harness coiled real snug. 4 zip ties to hold it secure underneath, sitting below the manifold itself. And then the exhaust line, if you want, you can leave it exposed. It'll be pretty loud inside this car because the cabin's so small, obviously. But I ran it straight over and back through that port. That way, when it releases air, it'll be outside the car. It'll be a little quieter inside the cabin, which is always nice for this vehicle. Another tip is for these two, for your fuses, sorry, for the main and second compressor, I went ahead top and bottom and marked second compressor and main, just in case. So again, if for any reason you need access to this stuff, you know what's what, and it makes it 10 times easier. I did go ahead and run the remote cable underneath along through this, chasing over, back down, and then over to the center console. Don't have to drill stuff, don't have to cut through anything. And then as well for the tank, this guy right here, this tank airline ran over, across. It's going to sneak right underneath this, back over, and then it's, quite a bit of excess airline, but I'm going to snip that when needed, and now go ahead and connect right to the tank as well, right to the water trap. So I'm going to get this just kind of patched up. I did run also the wires for the first and second compressor through this little channel underneath, so loosen this, lift this up just a tad, and it'll let these both sit right here. I'll probably pull them back a little bit so it's not flat on this overhang, or if you have a little bit more access to pull these a little further, probably sit in this little pocket. So what I did is I did male connectors instead, and then on this side female connectors instead of the I guess the connector where you have to pinch both. Again, that way if you have to remove all this stuff, it's way easier to go ahead and just quick disconnect everything. Convenience is key, cleanliness is ideal. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this finished up, and then we'll take a look at everything when it's done. So it is a little dark out, but this is ride height and also the finished look on this. So dual compressor, tank, mat, and then what we did too, as mentioned, is the separate panels, top and bottom. And that is it. So set ride height, full trunk install, clean. So thank you guys for checking in on that. If you guys, as always, have questions, need help, information on other installs or platforms, feel free to comment. Hopefully next time for the Bag Rider super low suspension on my Supra and Steven's, we kind of could do like a comparison between the two for the max drop and the max height, and kind of the differences between the two after he's had time to go ahead and drive the car around. So till then, thank you guys for checking in. See ya.